Election day is Tuesday, and there are some important statewide initiatives on the ballot. Proposition CC would allow the state to retain any surplus tax revenue in perpetuity. Proposition DD would legalize sports betting in Colorado and use the taxes for water development projects. Patty, it took a while for these campaigns to heat up, and I don't know if that's a sign, if it's just a slow season or that's inherent with these propositions. What do you think?
Well, I think the national scene is still taking all the oxygen out of the room, but both DD and CC are beginning to get pretty hotly contested. DD is one where the only clear winner, if it passes, is going to be the gambling towns. We're getting some things for Colorado Water Plan up to $29 million, which would be 10% of the casino's take on it. But they are clearly the winners. And whenever the casinos go to the ballot box, they seem to really know exactly how to play people. And really, what's the harm for sports betting? Most people want it. It's not going to affect a lot of people. The only people who are really paying for it are the people who lose to the casinos. I'm guessing that'll probably pass. But if you go up to Blackhawk and remember what that town once looked like before limited stakes gambling went in, you can just guess how this will affect those towns. CC is going to be the one that will be a fight to the finish. I don't know if there's been any polling, but people who still like Tabor do not like the idea of it going in perpetuity. And then there are a lot of people who look at the roads that they've been stuck on for the last 5 days and say, we need help here and in higher education.
Michael, you've been a part of a lot of different Proposition CC debates on the no side, if I'm right. How's the attendance been at those debates? What has the reaction been? How's being in the middle of the fight been for you?
Yeah, it's been interesting. It's definitely a race to kind of define this, and without people paying much attention, it has been interesting. I think, in certain areas they're really into it. In Jefferson County, I've done probably half of the debates or forums in Jefferson County, but all over the state there's a lot of interest for the people who are really in tune on one side or the other. I think, the Denver Post had a really good article this week about the ballot language and how important that is for both DD and CC, but especially for CC when it starts without raising taxes. It doesn't say Tabor in it, it doesn't say permanent, it doesn't say refunds. And so I think that makes it so that people are looking into it more last second. Turnout's been interesting so far, pretty low turnout across the board. But I think this is going to be razor tight the way that Ref C was. It was a 4-point margin. Even when Tabor passed, it passed with 53% of the vote. So these votes tend to be pretty close, and I think it could go either way on Election Day. DD, I think momentum is on the pro side. There really isn't an opposition that is coordinated against it. And so I think, you look at it, even with the low turnout, I predict that DD will pass.
Eric, you look at the timing with Proposition CC, and there's part of this that feels to me that there's a lot of strategy and part of being coincidence. It's an off-year election, so there's going to be lower turnout. The campaign for this thing didn't start until, I want to say, like mid-September tops. I mean, it was around this table we talked that it existed, but we really didn't know officially it existed. In fact, we didn't even do a debate here at Channel 12 because we didn't know until the middle of October that it was actually going to be a campaign. That may very well be to its advantage. I don't know if there's someone there, maybe Speaker Becker's thinking this was the plan all along. As you're looking at this so far, what do you think?
Yeah, I wrote a column on it for Colorado Politics a couple weeks ago, and I was pointing out exactly what you did, Dominic, about the low-key nature of this. I believe their, quote, campaign kickoff press conference for the proponents was on October 4th or 5th. I mean, it was an October date. And I commented at the time, when you're doing a kickoff in October, 2 weeks before ballots are going out, there's really not a campaign. My question was, is there sort of a perverse genius behind this? I don't think this was the strategy from the get-go. I think they were forced into the strategy, but it may be a beneficial strategy. I think I'm torn on CC. On DD, I really haven't followed it. I suspect Michael is right. I suspect it passes. Simply because it seems like something for nothing, and there's really not an opposition effort that's funded against it. On CC, on the one hand, you have very favorable ballot language, very attractive ballot language. If people just read the ballot and know nothing else, it is mom and apple pie stuff. On the other side, you have an off-year election and a really sleepy off-year election as they go, with lower turnout, and you have, at least the indications I'm seeing, is an electorate that is much more Republican than is typical than what the electorate is going to be November a year from now. Basically we have a third, a third, a third between Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated. Right now the Republicans are tracking at about 39% of the ballots. That number will go down as Election Day comes because Democrats tend to vote late, but it may only go down to maybe a 36 number. And if 36% of the universe voting are Republicans, and if it tends to be an older vote, which seems to be the pattern as well, the CC could be in trouble. I think Michael is right, again, in the sense that it's going to be close. It will pass narrowly or it will lose narrowly, and I'm not willing to put money on either side of those right now.
Natasha, I've always said that water is one of the most important issues in Colorado that very few people want to talk about. They want their sprinklers to be able to water their lawn in the summertime and not really worry about it, but it's still a huge issue for us, especially as fast as we're growing. Is that going to help DD pass? Is it more about water and less about sports betting, or do I have it backwards?
Maybe a little bit of both. I think, I've covered water for years now, and the thing that almost automatically when you first talk to somebody who's an expert on water, their first concern is how few people realize how hard it is to get that that water way up in the mountains all the way down to our tap. And the amount of effort, whether that's, sometimes federal projects to get that down, state agencies, utilities on a local level. And Colorado has spent a lot of time thinking about that, dating back to the very first days of the state, but even recently with the Colorado Water Plan, the problem is we haven't had a dedicated funding source for that. And that limits projects. It limits the future of that plan. Now, there are plenty of people who have opinions about the plan and whether it should be implemented the way that it's written and what that would look like and what those projects would look like. But this, if DD passes, would be an opportunity to start funding that. But ultimately, I think when people look at that ballot, they don't see water first. I think they see what the wording is about, which is about the betting.